the rest of the European Union kept suing them for using coal. Well, they're going to go back now. The Germans have a lot of lignite, which is ultra soft brown coal. It is their single largest source of fuel, and they're probably going to increase their use of it by at least a third this year, because there just aren't any other options. I'm actually a little bit more concerned about Austria and Italy than I am about Germany, because Germany at least has the coal. Austria and Italy got nothing. So Italy is an energy hub, but they have no energy themselves. And once the natural gas gets cut off when it comes to electricity generation, I mean, sure, they've got better solar potential than most of Northern Europe, but that takes years to come online. So I can actually see the Italians burning oil to keep the lights on, burning $200 a barrel oil, because the alternative is to not have power. Everyone's going to have to make some really ugly decisions, and environmentalism writ large is going to take a very serious back seat. And we're going to see this repeated, not just in Europe, but throughout the world, everywhere outside of Anglo-America. People forget that oil and natural gas are the low carbon fossil fuels, and they are the ones that are internationally traded. Coal's local. We are perfectly capable of having an energy crisis and a global depression that is energy spiked, and yet still increase our carbon output.
All right, thank you. There's also a couple questions regarding why Russia can't pivot more of its energy exports toward China and Asia more directly.
Sure, it's an infrastructure issue. So there are three routes from Russia into East Asia. The first is the ESPO, the Pacific pipeline that ends right around Vladivostok. Its nameplate is about 1.6 million barrels per day. At present, there have been no interruptions to loadings. That will probably hold. There's no war over there, so you don't have to worry about the insurance issue. It's simply a reputational issue for taking Russian crude, and obviously the Chinese have no problem with that. So that's bucket one. Bucket two, there is a short spur line that takes about 500,000 barrels a day that goes directly from Russia to the Chinese city of Daqing, which is the old Chinese refining center. I see no reason why that'll be disrupted at all. I mean, if all of Russia's stuff in the end goes offline, that's the last one to fall. And as the Russians are having problems with production, they will preference that one for geopolitical as well as security reasons. And then the third route is more dispersed. It uses the rail lines and rail cars, and it does about 300,000 barrels a day. And that's about the max that the system can handle. The Russians for a while tried to upgrade their rail network, and they just discovered that the task was beyond them in terms of cost and equipment. So 1.5 roughly from ESPO, 500,000 from Daqing, and then about 300,000 from rail. And that's it. There's no other infrastructure. And as a rule, with the exception of rail, those two pipelines are filled by fields that do not link into the European system. So it's not like stuff can just, you can flip a switch and spin a few valves and the energy will flow the other direction. Now it has dedicated fields in Siberia that are not linked into the European network at all. So you might be able to surge a little bit of fuel on rail, and you might replace some of the crude that you're sending on rail with, say, refined product, so you can move up the value added scale a little bit, but that's only 300,000 barrels. That's not going to move the needle for Moscow.
All right, thank you. Again, another few questions here on the topic of Iran stepping up to replace some of the oil that's being lost from the global market.
The news out of Iran is all over the place. It's either sanctions are almost done and we almost have a deal and we're all going to live together in happy family timeshare land, and it's going to happen next week, or the talks have been completely suspended and neither side has any interest in meeting. I have not had the time to look into just figure out which one it is. My guess it's the second one over the first one, but let's assume that Iran and the United States bury the hatchet and get along great, and we welcome Iran back into global energy. Most companies don't invest in Iran because of sanctions. They don't invest in Iran because the Iranians are completely jerks when it comes to operational projects and taxes and regulations and ownership. Any build out in Iran is going to be in that 3 to 8 year time year. Sorry, 3 to 8 year time span. The best you should hope for is if Iran is completely rehabilitated tomorrow, is that by the end of next calendar year, they've increased their output by 1 million barrels a day. That would be really impressive. And I don't think anyone should hope for more than that, unless there's a dramatic change in Tehran that all of a sudden it starts welcoming in Western energy companies to do everything everywhere. That's not going to happen.
All right, thanks. Are there any parts of the world where you see conflict due to energy shortages from increasing in likelihood?
Sure. I'd be really worried about China in this scenario. The Chinese do not have the military force to go to the Persian Gulf, and the Japanese do. So once the Europeans start redirecting stuff from East Asia, from West Africa, instead of going to East Asia to bring it up to Europe, and especially once the Americans fall out of the market, the Japanese have the ability to either interface with the United States, and so tap Western hemispheric sources, or sail directly to places like Saudi Arabia and convoy their own stuff. So I think there's a reasonable concern here that the Chinese are going to get increasingly belligerent because the Chinese needs 3 times the energy that the Japanese need, and they need it at a lower price in order to function. And if this just stacks on all the other problems that are boiling up within the Chinese system, that's a regime killer. So I can see a very real risk for an energy tinged conflict between China and its Asian neighbors. In the Persian Gulf, yeah, I mean, there's always the risk in the Persian Gulf that something's going to go horribly wrong. But in an environment where energy prices are high and rising